late to hit that share button too. So go ahead and hit that share button. Send it to everybody on your list. Everybody can benefit from today. And you're probably wondering, who is that and what is she doing? So let me introduce myself. Hi, I'm Kimberlon B. I am the host of Under the Scope. This is a scope cast that's designed to talk about mental health. My goal on this scope cast is to reduce stigma surrounding mental health. Let me talk about what led me to do Under the Scope. So I've been in the field for about 10 years, and I've worked with people from all walks of life, all presenting issues, and I've seen a lot and done a lot. But then I realized, like, hmm, most of the people aren't really making it into the counseling room, and why? So then, bing, it was this light bulb. And then I had this idea to just go outside of the counseling room to talk about the importance of mental health awareness and to reduce those stigmas. But then I realized this is a lot of ground to cover and I can't do it alone. So I decided to reach out to some of the most amazing, influential people on the planet for them to share their knowledge, skills, abilities, and experience, and most important of all, their contribution to mental health awareness. So that's why I'm sitting here before you today. So that's how Under the Scope goes. So another thing about Under the Scope that I find is pretty unique. This isn't your average ordinary show, right? I just want everybody to know this. It's not just called Under the Scope because the name is cute. No, no, no. Under the Scope is actually a participatory show. Everybody here has an opportunity to ask our guests questions. So this is how it goes. I'll talk with the guest. I have scripted questions. The guest knows the questions. But after I'm through with my questions, then there's the Under the Scope part where you have an opportunity to ask our guest questions. And they don't know what you're going to ask. So they have to be ready to give an answer off the cuff. So that's what makes this show really exciting, everyone. But with that being said, let me give the disclaimer. Any information on Under the Scope is for conversational, inspirational, and educational purposes and does not substitute you seeking a higher level of care if needed or outside resources if needed. If you need that, please message me at Kimberlon B LPC and I will get that information to you or put something in the comments, okay? All right, so this is how it goes. I just said you can participate. You can put your comments and questions. The Under the Scope part comes towards the end. Facebook Live. Hi, everybody on Facebook Live. Definitely put your questions, your comments in the comments, and they'll get to me. Zoom Room. What up, Zoom Room? Glad that you're joining me on the backside of everything and you get to hear the behind the stage shenanigans. Please utilize the chat. And we're actually on YouTube. So if you have a question, probably hit me up either through Facebook or Zoom. I may or may not see your comments on YouTube. Let me see. Let me see if I got all the formalities out of the way. So yeah, we have. We're getting ready to get this show on the road right now. Today's topic is one of the most taboo topics, right? I think if we rank anything like which came first, chicken or the egg, I think mental health and church will probably be second to that, right? Because these are one of these topics that we debate all the time, right? And some people don't realize that they can actually coexist. So today on Under the Scope, I want to talk about the topic of mental health in the church. And so, like I said, I can't do this alone. So I actually reached out to our guest about 2 years ago. I think it was around this, oh no, when we was in the thick of the pandemic. And I was like, can you please come on the show? Because my guest has awesome book, an awesome book. And we'll talk more about that later. And she said yes again. So I'm pretty excited about that. And so without further ado, because I've talked, probably talk, I would like to introduce you to my guest, Dr. Jessica Young Brown. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Jessica?
Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica Young Brown. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist based in the Richmond, Virginia area. And my work really centers around all the ways that faith and mental health can intersect. So I do work around supporting clergy in their mental health and wellness, preventing and recovering from burnout. I help churches to think about how to integrate mental health into the way we operate in Christian community. And I also help individuals to think about how to integrate their health, their mental health, in their spirituality through something we call spiritually integrated psychotherapy. I'm so excited to be with you today.
This is so awesome. And I want to get to our questions, but I always like to open up with a quote. And I think this is really going to start our questions now. So, word from word, this is a quote. If the local church really wants to be the hope of the world, then the local church needs to step into areas in which the world finds itself hopeless. And that's in the area of mental health. That quote was actually from Jared Wilson in 2017, which unfortunately or sadly, as we heard, actually committed suicide in 2019. So, as we know, that quote was really profound. And we see that mental health in church, that there is definitely a connection, Dr. Jessica. So, my question I want to just ask you is, can you share what inspired you? Because you wrote a book called Making Space at the Well, Mental Health in the Church, everyone. Really an amazing book. So, what inspired you to write this amazing book?
Yeah, so my father was a pastor. My mother is a minister. I grew up in the Black church. I'm a Black church baby. And my dad was one of those clergy people who experienced burnout. And it was so severe that he ended up having a major depressive episode, ended up taking several months off of work to just kind of recover and recalibrate. But at the time, my family did not know how to talk about what was happening. And so it wasn't until I got to college, I was a psych major. I'm sitting in my psych 101 class and we're talking about major depression. They're listing off the symptoms. And I'm like, wait a minute, that sounds familiar. But no one had ever said, your dad has depression. This is what depression means. Here's how it's impacting our family, because they just couldn't. And my understanding of that, my parents are both highly educated. My godfather is a psychologist, right? So it wasn't like they didn't know about mental health, but they really didn't know how to make sense of how someone so faithful, how a pastor, how someone who could be called to be a pastor could also be struggling with this mental health condition. They just didn't have the language for it. And later, when I was in graduate school, I found out there were many people in my family who struggle with mental health, and the family didn't talk about it, right? And I think that's like so many Black families, right? That we just don't know how. And I really saw my role and really felt called to be someone who can be a translator, to be a bridge, to kind of go between, so that we do have language. And then once we begin to talk about it, we know what to do about it.
That's true. And I can only imagine, because definitely mental health was like super taboo. I mean, I think right now where we're at, it's like, we're getting better with talking, but back then, no. No, no,
And
no,
even
no.
then, I think the people who are talking about it now are often like your Gen Z, maybe millennials, but your Gen Xers and your baby boomers, they might go to therapy maybe, but they're not going to talk about it like millennials and Gen Z do, right? So even it's still continuing to be a process in terms of putting things out in the open.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And you're right, because I was like, yeah, because I deal with all ages. And yes, when people are around my age or older, it's like, no, I just get a little sad. I'm not depressed. I get over it. I figure out what to do. I don't
You just
sit
keep
there and
moving.
it's like, okay, all right. All right, then. So then my next question, let's talk about mental health and the church, right? Since everybody loves to talk about it. Why do you think that this topic is a great debate?
So I think it's a great debate because we as the church sometimes tend toward having one solution for everything. And it's even in our, I'm talking particularly about the Black church, right? Even in our language, right? There's a song that says, God is my all in all. Or we say things like, if you're going to pray, don't worry. And if you're going to worry, don't pray. Right. And so I think those kinds of messages, I'll say accidentally, I'll give us the benefit of the doubt, accidentally lead us to believe that if it doesn't have a cross slapped on it somewhere, we can't trust it. Wow. And I think that's compounded in the Black church because we as Black people in this country in particular have been harmed historically by these official systems, right? The medical system, the mental health system. And so there's, I think, a resistance to go outside the church that has been our safe space because we're not sure how we will be handled in those other spaces. And the combination of those two things, I think, leads us to a point where we are distrustful of mental health professionals, of therapy, not to mention the way we as Black folks survived in this country is by taking it on the chin. I mean, part of the training during the civil rights era was actually to not show emotion while people were calling you names and spitting on you and kicking you, right? That was a part of the way we intentionally steeled ourselves to try to get civil rights. And the thing is, it's not like once the Voting Rights Act was passed, this switch flipped and now all of a sudden we can feel our feelings, right? Because we have generations of having to, as you said earlier, just kind of push through to make it. So it's in our DNA, it's in our cultural values. And then we have the added element of feeling like we have to go through the church because that's the safest space.
That's true. And it's, just like you were saying, I definitely agree with you because it's like, it's hard to identify where it starts or where it may show up in people's lives. But, and it actually, I was just thinking when you were talking about it, because we may give that message across in the pulpit too, and unfortunately using scripture to support people. Go ahead. Yes, I already said it was a disclaimer. Look at me, I'm close to the mic. But using the scripture to support, like, you really aren't praying hard enough, or something like that, and it makes it hard for us to be truthful with it. Right. That's what I've noticed. So even though I've even noticed sometimes, not at my church, but sometimes at other churches, like, where it's like, okay, we're going to talk about it. And I'm like, we making strides. I'm sitting up there with my therapist smile on in church, really praising. But then it turns into this, all right, come up front, let's pray. All right, that's okay, still standard. But once you get there, it's almost like you're getting punished for having whatever you're dealing with in the first place, and you're not doing anything about, and I'm having to instill inside of you that this, and this is what you got to do to get it together, and you got to get it together. And so you leave there thinking, I got to get it together, but then you're okay. But when you step away, are you okay? Right. Is it still there? Was that a temporary fix? Because, not discounting church, because I don't want anybody to say she just discounted church. I get just hearing the word to refresh my soul, I get an adrenaline rush, like, yes, because this is after my week, this is what I need. But then, I get that way. But then afterwards, we talk about on that Monday or whatever, we start to settle. And does it still have that impact? And if I'm dealing with depression, anxiety, or something like that, then it's like, why am I feeling this way again? I just said I was going to leave it at the altar.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. I think, we love this language around take your burdens to the Lord and leave them there, right? So on this imagery, what we miss, I think, in that process sometimes is that we know this from our therapeutic work, right? The unburdening process is actually a gradual one. So I might make a decision to leave something at the altar, but then the question for me to wrestle with when church is over is, what's the unburdening process that I'm going to dig into in my life so that I can actually trust God to take care of that, and me not just pick it back up after I cry and pray it's not all over myself, right?
Yes.
There's a term, which I think you're really kind of hitting on this, called spiritual bypassing. Where people basically use spiritual practices to avoid feeling their feelings or actually dealing with the things they need to deal with. And I think sometimes in the church, we encourage spiritual bypassing, not on purpose, right? But we've all been in church services where the message that gets sent either explicitly or implicitly is, if you just praise hard enough, that problem is going to poof, disappear. And while I believe in the power of God to work miracles, the reality is the vast majority of us have to put in some work for those miracles to come to pass, right? Yes. And so I think we also have to begin talking about that in the church too. One of the first sections in the book talks about the necessity of prayer and action. We have to do both. And it's, for me, at least, it's our responsibility as faith communities to push folks beyond that prayer moment. Continue to pray, continue to partner with your faith community, and let's put some legs on this thing. Let's find a support group. Let's go to therapy. Let's read some books. Let's do something.
Yes.
So that you can actually help God make this miracle come to pass.
Right. We do got to put that action in. Yes. So that is so true. I can agree about 159% with you. Yes. So I know you talked a little bit about this, and I'm going to ask you anyway, because I want us to dig a little bit more when you mentioned about Black church communities, because I was at a NAMI event. It was pre-pandemic. I was about to say long time ago, pre-pandemic. And I was just walking around, like looking at the materials, anything that I can get. And I came across a booth that said mental health ministry. And at that booth, it was Caucasian people, right? And they were like, well, yes, at our church, we got this and we're trying to pass this out. I mean, they had a big display. And they like, no, we bring this in our church. This is what we need to talk about. And I was like, wow, because this, it took me a while to even try to get involved in a conference at church to talk about mental health. It took years before I was offered an opportunity to do it. So do you think it's more challenging for our Black church communities than other communities to discuss mental health? Or do you think it's just a global problem?
I would say both things are true. I think as Black folks, we have kind of an added layer of stigma being people of color in this country. And I think you posted something last week or the week before about the percentage of the different mental health practitioners that are people of color, right? Yes. So I think we have these sort of added barriers that if you look at, let's say, a white congregation, they may not have those same barriers. I think the other thing too is Black church culture is just different. For instance, I'll never forget when I was teaching at a seminary, one of my colleagues was a pastor, and she's a white woman, and her parishioners called her by her first name. Wow. And I was like, like, we would never do that in Black church. But I think that speaks to, there's a certain way many of us show up to Black church that can sometimes keep us from having access to those vulnerable and intimate spaces, right? And I think too, that's about our history. In the 50s and 60s, we were sweeping floors and cleaning toilets and really in positions that society didn't respect, even though we knew how important they were to the functioning of a community. But church was the only place that we could dress up and be called by our last name and have a place of leadership. And I think, that sort of physical and figurative Sunday best can sometimes keep us from talking about those spaces where we might feel shame. So it's different if you're raising money for a school, because that's kind of a communal thing. But if I have to talk about how my spouse is actually dealing with alcoholism, that's different. It hits closer to home, and it might rub up against this fact that maybe church is the only place where I can feel important and have that place of influence. And I think we as Black folks feel that differently than other communities do because of our history.
Ooh, you are on to something. Yes, yes, yes. I was thinking about that Sunday best. And sometimes I said in our community, yeah, about 2 to 3 years ago, that's when we had to wear a mask, but some of us been wearing masks, when we show up there. And I really like what you said. This is a place where we can be seen. I never thought about that, Dr. Jessica, that we can be seen and acknowledged by our last name. So I'm just like you said, I'm sure not going to tell you what's really going on in my house. I'm not going to tell you about my spouse being an alcoholic. I'm not going to tell you that I'm getting abused. I'm not even going to think to tell you that I thought 3 days ago about taking my life. Oh, absolutely not. Not in here, because it is showtime.
Absolutely. There's a case in Virginia that's going on right now. It seems from the outside that it's like an intimate partner violence situation where the husband has been charged with the wife's death, and she was at church that morning, right? And I wonder about she was an active member of the church, and I wonder about how many people in that community really knew what she was struggling with, right? Because so many of us keep things secrets because we just don't know how to ask for help. And to the point that we were making earlier, sometimes we have to reckon with, and I would say atone for, the fact that in our community, sometimes when people did ask for help, or as my grandmother would say, their slip was starting to show a little bit, they actually didn't get help, they got condemned.
Ooh.
Right? So the partner who's being abused, the pastor tells them to go pray over their marriage because God doesn't condone divorce. Right? Or this idea that if somebody's struggling with a substance, you can just pray real hard and not do it anymore. Right? And so I think in those ways, we've done a disservice to the people who asked for help, and the folks who were wondering about asking for help saw that too.
Yes. Well, you just talked about it. I learned from my clinical director about the 3 A's, and I said that in church about adultery, which is one. Pray harder. Pray. You just sit there and pray till he come back. You get there and pray until she come back.
You need to pray over your spouse, and they'll come back to you.
Just wait and labor in that. And I heard somebody at a church once say that they had been praying for 15 years. And I'm like, how many warning signals did God give you that this probably was over, game over? But anyway, so, but
look, we need to do a whole other section on that one.
Okay, we do. Y'all hear that? We're gonna do it now. Yeah, and then with the addictions, with everything else, they'll tell you to go pray, 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 and then really that adds trauma to the trauma, because it's like I'm praying and I'm believing, but nothing's happening. Or we think nothing's happening. Oh man, we could talk about that forever. But yeah, it is a lot in our community. So I'd like to ask everybody, because I skipped this question. I was so excited, but everybody that comes on Under the Scope, I always like to ask them, what is their definition of mental health?
Yes. So my definition of mental health encompasses 4 things: healthy relationships, awareness and management of stress, emotion regulation, and positive self-concept. And for me, when we think about from the perspective of spiritually integrated mental health, right, our spiritual health actually supports and informs all of those different areas, right? Because there's guidance in the Bible about what healthy relationship looks like and conflict resolution. There's guidance in the Bible around how we are made in God's image and what that means in terms of how we care for our bodies, right? There's guidance in the Bible even about how to respond to strong emotions. Be angry and sin not, right? Even Jesus wept when he was grieving the death of Lazarus, right? And then finally, to really just have a way of understanding, how do we understand ourselves in relationship? How do we understand how to manage kind of the ebbs and flows of life?
Yeah, that's true. I like that. I like that four part because I know we've been talking about like treating the whole person. You have to treat the whole person. You know, the mental health, physical health, it all comes together, and definitely
Mhm.
that coexisted as well. So yeah, so I know we was just talking a little bit about praying it away, going over here, and we talk about the struggles that we have talking about it in the Black church communities. And so I've talked to so many people. I know I was sharing before we went live, and I've talked to so many people before. I talk about this stuff, Dr. Jessica, all the time about that, you know, Jesus and the therapist. It got the shirt, Jesus and the therapist, got another one that says it, talk about it at church, post about it, everything else. And people agree with me, but there's no change. So my question for you is, do you think we will ever overcome this barrier in the Black community?
I think we will make progress. Um, it kind of depends on how you define overcome. Do I think there's going to become a point where every single Black person is going to be willing to go to therapy? No,
No.
I don't. But I do think that more and more of us will be able to. I think more and more of us, even if we don't step foot in a therapy office, will be more open to at least thinking about our mental health as one of the facets of what it means to be a whole and healthy human. And I think over time, we will raise children who are free,
Yeah.
who are free to actually seek out their wholeness and to seek God for direction about how to do that. So I do think we're getting there. Even
Okay.
in, I've been a psychologist for almost 10 years. And even as I think about when I first started my career versus now, it's amazing how much progress I've seen. And so I feel hopeful. And a part of that too, to your point, is I think recognizing everybody won't always see it. But if more of us see it, we can have a ripple effect on our whole community. So that even if my grandmother never goes to therapy, if I'm healthier and I show up in relationship with her in a different way, she gets better by accident. And that matters too.
I like that. I like what you say. I talk a lot about that in the counseling room about that,
Absolutely.
especially with family. Okay, that could be another show too.
Yeah, that's a whole nother show too.
But I mean, with that, because sometimes we expect that other person to change or these people to change. But like you said, if we do our work, then they have no choice but to change, right?
Mm-hmm.
They will. I like what you said, changing by accident. I'll have to use that because they do.
They
Because
do.
if
Yeah,
I
they
don't
have to.
play my part, they can't play their part.
There you go.
So
The system has to change. If one part of the system changes, the system has to change. So
yes,
healing has ripple effects. And so
yes.
if we don't see progress, we can be reminded that our healing will have an impact for sure. It
It
must.
it must, yes. So, under the scope, people that's viewing, okay? So, at that next family dinner, at that next holiday, or when you go to church tomorrow, if you have identified and you know those people that try you now
Mm-hmm.
in this, so to speak. Anyway, if those people that try you, if you change your narrative, the way you respond, look, this is free, okay? This part is free. Everything else, you'll need to either, remit payment to Dr. Jessica or myself. But
Yeah.
if you change your narrative, you're going to get free,
You
okay?
will. You will.
So just FYI. All right. All right, so going on because the chat is actually blowing up, so I have a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
things to ask you for under the scope. But I do want to ask you this because I was thinking about it, and even when you brought up the post about what for our BIPOC communities, how the Black helping professionals is slim to none. I think even in your discipline, I think it's even less, right? Is it 4%?
I haven't looked at the percentage because it's
Okay.
probably not gonna be something that sounds good, but it's low. It's low. Yeah.
It's real low. And then it's low for the counselors, social workers, and everyone out there that's been identified as a helping professional, your doctors and everything else. So I know we have the great debate, the mental health in the church. And so there's churches that want to know, there's churches that want to be educated. And I know we're like, well, we need to get in, but they need us to get in. But somehow it's not enough of us, really. And really, if we consider all other communities, for the amount of churches. So really, we got to start to head towards a partnership of some sort, whatever that looks like. So my question to you is, what can we as Black helping professionals do to close the gap with these churches? The churches need us and we need them.
So I mean, your show is a great example of this. I think we have to get off the couch, because, and let me be clear, I think for me, that individual therapy hour is a sacred time, both as a client and as a clinician. So go to therapy. Yeah. And I think we as therapists have to think about how we can reach more people than can fit on our caseload. So if it's social media, I do a lot of workshops and those kinds of things with churches. And I've reached many more people at a workshop. Even if they never go to therapy, they know about the 4 domains of mental health that I teach about, right? Or I've taught them a meditation. I've had so many people email me afterward and say, that breathing exercise that you taught us, I'm sleeping so much better. And now I'm thinking clearer just after a week, right? So those kinds of things, I think we have to really think about how to maximize our efforts in those ways so we can reach more people. And the other thing too, you said partnerships. I think we can think about how do we partner with churches and community organizations to host support groups, to host book clubs, right? As much as we can talk about this conversation and get the word out, we reach more and more people. And I also view it as my responsibility as a psychologist to mentor other folks in the field who are doing this work. Right? So to have those conversations with young clinicians, either young in experience or young in age, who might be thinking about going into spiritually integrated psychotherapy, or to make sure that when I'm teaching undergrads and I see a promising young person of color, to make sure I can support them so that they can get to the graduate school level, right? I really think about all of the different ways, because at the end of the day, I'm only one person. But if I think about all of the people that I touch and all the people that I have access to, right? That's a much broader audience and a much broader even group of people who can then go make change.
That's so true. And Dr. Jessica mentioned book club. I know she's gonna, I know that she's gonna talk about this book later, but this book is designed for a book club.
It absolutely is.
And everybody should have their own copy. Okay, just know, so they can make notes and everything else. So I know, I'm sorry, I got to put that plug in, but the book is real good for that. And it's a good book anyway. So I just wanted to bring that up. Let me see. I know you were saying about that. I want to make sure that I have everything and I got my questions out of the way. I do have my first little under the scope question for you. Now, this is for me though.
Okay.
Can you explain a little bit, probably in lay terms, about spiritually integrated psychotherapy?
Yeah. So spiritually integrated psychotherapy is just a process where we use the client's worldview, including spiritual beliefs, as a frame for how they understand the world. Right? So it's just like we talk about culture, whether it's race or sexual orientation. We ask people about marital status. We ask people about their family history, right? It's really digging into not just, is this person religious or not, check a box, but how does this person's religious and or spiritual beliefs inform the way they understand the world? And then using that as a resource in the therapy process. So my clients are not all Christian, but the majority of my clients are Christian. And so, for instance, I have clients all the time to ask me to pray for them. And so one of the things I ask is, do you want to pray now or do you want me to be praying in my personal prayer practice? And often they say both, right? And so then the question is, would you like to pray or do you want me to pray? Sometimes clients say, no, I don't really want to pray now. I just want you to be praying. Cool, that's fine, right?
Right.
I also think too about helping clients to critically evaluate how their faith sort of helps them to navigate their mental health situation.
Got
And it's
it.
really tapping into those things like, do people actually have negative spiritual messages that are causing shame? And can we unwork those? There was really interesting research that, people sometimes think like, oh, being Christian or believing in God, I should say, is a protective factor for mental health. And it's actually not that simple. It's not just believing in God, it's actually who you believe God is. So if you believe God is a benevolent and loving God, then yes, believing in God is a protective mechanism for mental health. If you believe God is angry and vengeful and wrathful, believing in God actually limits your mental health, makes you more at risk, right? So spiritually integrated psychotherapy intentionally asks those deeper questions. It's not just what religion are you, it's what do you believe about God? How do your spiritual practices inform or relate to the way you care for your body, right? And those kinds of things really help clients to not feel like they have to leave a part of themselves outside the therapy room.
Got it. I got it. Everybody, all right, offering buckets, get them out. Let's get them out, going around, get them around there, get in the back. All right, that was a word right there. But it's true though. In all honesty, it's true. So thank you for even sharing that. So we're getting ready to take you under the scope. Like I said, the chat has been blowing up on both sides. It's not too late, everyone. Just because I'm asking questions, you can still put in your questions. It's not too late to share because somebody probably needs to get something out of this. So I'm going back up to the top and then we'll work our way down. So the first question is, what are the signs of mental health and how do you notice it?
Okay, so we talked some about what I consider kind of good mental health. If the question is about like, how do we know when our mental health might be struggling? I think the first sign is just not feeling like yourself, right? Really feeling like I'm not operating in the way I normally do, whatever that looks like. And let me just say explicitly, you don't have to be in a full-blown crisis to seek out mental health support. Right. You don't have to be. And in fact, what we know is the earlier you go, the better we're often able to manage whatever that thing is. So the minute you start kind of feeling like, oh, I'm feeling a little off, go then. We can save ourselves some work if you go at the beginning.
Please.
Please. For Black folks in particular, this is also true for people of Asian descent and some for folks who might be Central American or Latin American. Our bodies tell the tale. So you might not be able to say, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling anxious, but your stomach has been on 100 for the past 3 weeks, or you've been having trouble sleeping, or you've been having headaches, or your body has just felt different, or you're gaining weight or losing weight and it doesn't seem to match what you're doing, right? All of those kinds of bodily symptoms can often be ways of saying, hey, we need help. We're not okay, right? And so really attending to your body helps with that as well. We also might get feedback from some other folks, right? So somebody we're in relationship with might say, you've been real snappy lately. Are you okay? And our initial inclination might be to say, no, girl, I'm fine. But that's an opportunity for you to really get curious about yourself, right?
Yeah.
Have I been snappy? Have I been short-tempered? Maybe something is going on.
Yes. All right. Here's another comment that's going. It says, I recently dealt with manipulation under some leadership. I was in a lot of tears, cried myself to sleep. And it says, I'm glad the Lord led me to leave that church and go to a new church. Thank God. I did talk to a counselor about it, and that helped a lot. So that's interesting. Anything you want to chime in with that? It's been a debate about church hurt too. Don't want to go down that rabbit trail because some people believe that it is or that it's not, and whatever, but still, like this person just shared about the manipulation in that church. What about that
So,
one?
yeah, so I think this is probably one of the most challenging places I found myself in as a clinician, because I never want to like badmouth somebody's pastor or a spiritual leader, right? But at the same time, I have a responsibility to at least highlight if a pattern looks like it's unhealthy. And then my goal is to really have the client come to their own realization about whether this relationship is healthy for me or not.
Mm-hmm.
I've also worked with that pastor who I've said, it actually sounds like you're kind of railroading these people in your congregation. Can we talk about what's going on here? Right. And often those leaders, most people most people are not being intentionally malicious. I really do believe that. Most are not being intentionally malicious. But when people haven't done their own work, they bleed. Right. And so I think for me, my responsibility as a Christian is to offer grace and to say, I'm even gonna pray for this person who's harmed me, but that doesn't mean I have to stay in relationship and continue to get cut up, right? We can do both. I can pray for you from afar, and God bless you on your journey. Our paths diverge here because I'm done being beat up, right? Yes. And so I think it's important for us to be able to hold both. Sometimes we become so focused on forgiveness and God offering grace that we actually do a disservice to ourselves, staying in places that are unhealthy for us. And I think it's important to be able to hold both of those things.
Yes, it is, which led into the next comment. Just what you said, it was spot on. In order to lead and coach, you have to uncover your own mask. And together Absolutely. We will be able to do more. And said they love this topic. So that was true. Just what you said, they probably bleeding all over everywhere else, which that's another spot. I know I didn't have that up today to even talk about the leadership in church and mental health, because, we're all human. We all have had our experiences, but how many of us have done our work? Yeah. Like in the church, in our field, we learn you got to do that work before you get out there and work with someone else, or you'll switch places with that person and they'll be helping you, or you'll both be bleeding everywhere. But also in churches, there's a need for that too, right?
Absolutely.
I can almost understand why, if I'm leading a church, I may not want to tell. I may not want to tell everybody I'm dealing with this, and 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 this. But however, I need to go tell somebody, and I need to do my work.
Right. And we can use wisdom, right? I mean, I work a lot with clergy, and that's one of the reasons I'm like, if I can get to this clergy person and get them healthy, again, other people gonna heal by accident, right? And so that really is important. But I also think there is great power in authenticity, because another thing that's very particular about the Black church is the way we esteem our leaders. Yes. And I think sometimes we put our leaders on pedestals so that the fall is so hard and so detrimental because we put them up too high in the first place. And clergy can participate in that, right? Putting themselves up on that pedestal. And so I think you're right. Nobody has a responsibility to tell all their business, but we also know about the power of testimony. Yes. And so when we can be authentic and say, look, I struggled, or I saw a therapist. I always, whenever I'm doing a workshop, I put in there some way something my therapist told me. And it's not just because I really like telling people I have a therapist, but I know that I don't seem like somebody who would need a therapist. And maybe somebody will say, okay, well, if she can go, maybe I can go, right? Yes. And so we combat the stigma by talking about our process in authentic ways. But I think it's important that we do that at least while we're in the healing process, so we don't glorify suffering. So we don't glorify being sideways and out of order, right? Because that's not okay either.
Right. Because it can go either way. Because somebody be like, well, that's not too bad. I know I can get there later. I can get back to good later. But that sounds great. All right. So here's the next question. How do you convince someone to seek mental health therapy who may be in denial about needing the help?
So we can't ever make people do something they don't want to do, but we can say, hey, I've noticed XYZ and I feel concerned about that. I think you could benefit from going to a therapist. And this is the piece that's really important in our faith communities. When we do that, let's try to make a good referral. So Google isn't good enough, right? Because we need to try to find somebody who would be a good fit. So it could be a therapist that you know that someone went to and had a good experience, or you might say, let's see if are you open to sitting down and searching for a therapist together? Maybe we can find somebody who you think would be a good fit for you, right? And if the person says, no, I don't want to do that, I think we have to respect people's boundaries, but that doesn't mean we don't continue to bring it up if we continue to see that there's a need. It's important sometimes having a person who you know loves you and really cares about you to say, I don't think you're okay and I want to help you to be okay, can really be transformative. And so I think we just have to have the conversation. We don't need to beat people over the head with it, because y'all know sometimes people get defensive and do the opposite of what we think they should do. But we can be gentle and patient and persistent in the way that we just let people know that we're concerned.
Exactly. Yes. Agreed. Like that. Next question. I love this topic. I knew we were going to have some questions. Do you think mental health therapy can play a major role in couples seeking marriage counseling?
I absolutely think that couples need to do premarital counseling. It doesn't necessarily have to be a mental health professional. If the clergy person has some training on how to do premarital counseling, it just depends on what that person knows. I do think it's a good practice to really do a deep dive into those big questions before you get married, because love can make a lot of things look pretty. And, as time goes on, if you don't at least tackle or have conversations about those big issues, they'll continue to come back up until you address them. So I think it's an excellent strategy. Even with therapists, I would say go to a therapist who is trained in premarital counseling, because not all of us are trained in couples work. So you don't want to go to just any old therapist. Go to a therapist who really has skills and abilities in that particular area, so you can talk about those big issues and get them on the table. Talk about your shared values. Talk about the areas where you're different. Talk about how your faith is going to be a part of your marriage, right? All of that needs to be on the table before you say I do.
Exactly. Yes. All right. Here we go. I got a statement for you. It says, I think from when you were talking, it says, tell them a part of your own story when you had to seek a therapist or a dark side you experienced. It says people can relate well to people if they experience it as well. Agreed.
Yeah, the point about convincing somebody to go to therapy, I think that's a great strategy. There's a whole chapter in the book about the power of testimony, right? And how we can really, to your point, bring other folks in by just talking about our journey, right? It's inspirational if somebody can say, yeah, I was depressed, but I went to therapy and I engaged my spiritual practice and I took that medication. And now it's not that the depression totally goes away, but there's also not a cloud over my head every single moment of my life, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Not taking that medicine, Dr. Jessica, that's a whole new level. You're asking me to talk and take medicine? But it turns into that, it really does, even though I was making a joke about that, which is another taboo part that's connected to mental health, is taking medicine. And it's like, I don't want to take that medicine. I don't want to lose myself. Chances are, if you're struggling with depression, anxiety, or anything else, you're probably not yourself anyway, right?
You're not yourself, right?
So just take that medication and allow yourself to introduce you to yourself. right?
Mhm.
And I believe in that. It's just, I mean, we can throw the biggest fits behind taking medication. And it's like, but when your head hurt, you asking any and everybody for Tylenol, whatever you got to take.
Ibuprofen. What's the other
Yeah.
one?
Advil,
BP, Advil, all of it.
all of it. You asking somebody and will take it down. But if you're going through, it's like, I don't need that. I can just power through that.
And it's not to say that everybody needs medication, because
right.
of course everybody doesn't. But if there's a pathway for less suffering, Jesus said, I have come that they might have life and have it more abundantly, right?
Yes.
And so it's like all of these pathways to abundant life, who am I to turn them down?
Yes. A pathway to less suffering, everyone. Yes. And that's what we're talking about today. All right. I was trying to see if we're getting any more questions. I think we're probably going to slow down. I'll keep my eye on it. This hour is passing fast. But before we go, I know, I've been throwing up Dr. Jessica's book, and I'm going to do it again because this book is good. Wait, let me see. Hang on real fast. I'm going to give this comment, and I want us to talk just a little bit about your book. So it says also, what is very sad is when actions are not godly. Some of them do not see what they are doing is wrong. That is key. And we kind of talked a little bit about that earlier. And unfortunately, they may be in those positions in church leadership, bleeding, like we talked about, bleeding over everyone. And that does turn into a sad situation. That's why, I mean, my hope and my prayer, even with Dr. Jessica's book and more therapists that are aligned or that specialize in this area, that we do try to create these partnerships or reach out to these churches to see if we can get in there and talk about it. Even talk about it, even if it's a separate one for the congregation and another separate one for leadership, right? Absolutely. Because, we do, have to respect, not saying one class of people is higher than the other, but come on now. If I was sitting right here on Under the Scope telling you everything A to Z what's wrong with me, you probably won't ever listen to me again, right? But but giving them an opportunity to understand that it's okay to go and seek help for themselves. Because even going back to the quote that I used earlier at the very beginning by Jared Wilson, I mean, he spoke in front of thousands, bringing others to Christ. He himself was a mental health advocate. And I don't even discount it by even him taking his own life. But this is what we're talking about. Somebody may need an extra layer of care.
It's the intensity of the suffering, right?
Yes.
And I think we haven't even really touched on how we deal with suicide, right? Ooh. But there are some religious traditions that think suicide is a sin. And it's like, people who are thinking about taking their lives really don't want to die. They just have not found any hope to hold on to, right? And they don't see a way out. And so I think if our conversations about mental health save one person from taking their life, that matters. But we have to talk about it so people know it's actually okay to say that I'm not okay. It's okay to say that I'm suffering, or I'm struggling with seeing the God in this. So I need you to pray for me because I cannot pray for myself. Right. But if we can't be authentic in these spaces, we really lose the opportunity to minister to people who are hurting.
That's so true. That's so true. And I'm so glad that they actually came out with even an easier number for the crisis line. I am so glad. We don't even have to do the 1-800 anymore, everyone. You can just hit 988 and you will be connected with someone. So, I mean, this is the biggest step that prevents people from suffering in silence, right? And I want to just thank everyone, really. I mean, we're getting ready to talk about the book, but even thank everyone this far who was even sharing this information with us and providing us with these comments, because that's actually getting close to that free, or you telling us how you just had to overcome, because that hurt. I like what you said about that suffering, because that suffering is what makes everything seem so strong and long, y'all. And that's where the emotions are at, is if we just keep pressing on and do what we need to do, therapy or whatever that looks like, whatever we need to do, we can close the door on that.
Can I just say one more piece around?
Yes, please.
We have to believe that our suffering does not disconnect us from God, right? Like,
yes,
God is there too. And there are so many scriptures in the Bible where people really cried out to God, and God responded every single time, right? Yes. Even Jesus said, Lord, if there's any way you can take this cup, I would like you to go ahead and take it, right? And so I think we have to remember that we don't have to keep our suffering. We can't keep our suffering from God, but we don't have to keep silent about it either, because God is there with us in the midst. And sometimes the process of us sharing that and being open about it is really what creates the pathway for us to get to a place where we're not suffering as much.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, somebody. Thank you, Choice, for posting the 988 number, because I want everyone to know about it. Now, I want you to talk a little bit about this book, Dr. Jessica, right? I still want people to buy it, so we're not going to give them everything. But I do want people to know right now, when people are tuned in, because I know we're getting to the end and I don't want to forget, because you came on Under the Scope, I do want to bless or give somebody with a copy of your book, because I have the book, and the book is a game changer, everyone. And I know Dr. Jessica's about to talk about it. But if this is the case, I know it's Facebook and I'm like all about privacy. If you want to message me like your email address, please message me your email address. I'm doing like this raffle with the randomizer, everyone. And in the chat room, if you can just leave your email address as well, and I'll gather those, and then I'll actually reach out to you for your address and information so I can get this book. Talk a little bit about the book and where can we find the book?
Sure. So the book uses the John 4 passage of Jesus and the woman at the well as a model for what it means for faith communities to engage in what I like to call ministry for mental health. So I don't think that every church needs to have a mental health ministry or counselor on staff. Some of our churches are never going to be able to do that. What we can do is build communities where people can talk about what's going on with them. And so the book uses the acronym SPACE, as in each letter is a chapter. I talk about stigma. I talk about how we build persistent relationships that can help keep people engaged, even if they're not walking in the church doors. I talk about what it means to just build strategies for how to plan for crisis, for how to resource our communities. And then I talk about testimony, the power of really sharing our stories. And I intentionally kind of wrote the book like you're sitting down having a conversation with me. You don't need a dictionary. You don't need a mental health degree. You don't need any kind of specialized knowledge to read this book. It really is for everybody. And my hope is that people can read it. And first of all, know that God is desiring the best for you and desiring health and wholeness for you, but also that we challenge ourselves to really be the kind of people where people can show up as fully themselves, to be the kind of people where people can come undone with, where people can talk about their issues, and that we really circle around each other to provide love and support.
Nice. Creating platforms for voices to be heard, saving one life at a time.
Absolutely.
That's a quote by Sister Love. Yay. All right, you got kudos that's coming in on the chat. Can't wait to get this book. Thank you, Dr. Jessica. God bless you. Making space, your acronyms, yo. This book is good. I'm telling you, everyone. You. So where can we find the book? I know I'm giving one away. I'm blessing somebody, but where can we find it?
Sure. So you can get it on Amazon. There's paperback and a Kindle version. You can also order directly from the publisher, judsonpress.org. You can find it there. If you would like a signed copy, you can go to my website, drjessicabrown.com, and I'll mail it to you with my John Hancock in it.
Awesome. All right. So besides this amazing book, where can we find you? What else do you have going on?
Yeah, so the other kind of arm of my work, in addition to the spiritually integrated psychotherapy, is I do consultations with churches and organizations around race, racial trauma, generational trauma, training mental health professionals on becoming more inclusive, being anti-racist. So I do all of those kinds of things. You can, probably the easiest way to find me is my website. It's just drjessicabrown.com. I was telling Kim when we talked before, I'm sort of moderately active on social media, but it's Dr. Jessica Brown on all the things, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I would love to connect with you. I do a lot of workshops. Some of those are public, so if you follow me, you can kind of access those things too.
Everybody follow. I'm going to be following. This stuff sounds good. I'm like, wait, I was trying to mentally do a checklist. You talk about all this? This is good. But I was trying to see, this has definitely been a pleasure. This has been an hour. It always goes by so fast.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun, but really with this wealth of information, you have supplied us with so much, Dr. Jessica. And I'm so excited that you were here today with us.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's been my pleasure.
I'm glad we was able to connect. This was amazing. Everyone saying thank you. Thanks, everyone. And I hope everyone got something from it. Again, if you want a copy of the book, if you want me to randomize your name, please put your emails in the chat or either in the comments on Facebook or send me a message through my page, okay? And I'll randomize it and I'll reach out. But otherwise, go to Amazon and get the book. Or you know what? Even if you want the John Hancock, just go directly to the website, okay? This is a good book again for Bible studies, books, book circles, you name it, whatever else. Get this book, everyone. But again, everybody get all their copies, okay? Let's go ahead and bless with fruits, right? Let's not try to Xerox, okay? Xerox is our friend, but let's just get the book, right? It's nothing like having this book in your hand, right? You don't have to worry about that other page 10 being missing, right? You'll have it all right here. But this has been a pleasure, everyone, on Under the Scope. You know, we always learn so much. I hope this topic, again, helped you. We'll be back in August, everyone. I believe in self-care. I do self-care Saturdays a lot. I'm out in the community talking about mental health also. I'll keep everybody posted on my page, like Under the Scope. I know I'm trying to get those ratings up. You know, the algorithms always keep them down. They try to keep them down, but you know what? I'm a rise. I'm an elevator, okay? Rising above those occasions. But thank everyone. Again, like I always say, if it wasn't for you, there'll be no me right here on Under the Scope. Dr. Jessica, if you ever want to come back again, please come back again. I would love to have you if you have time. But until then, everyone, take care of yourself, right? Self-care is important. Go ahead and get that therapist if you need that therapist. Pass this information along, share this recording, share the information, most importantly, about 988. We don't want people suffering in silence. And I will see you back in August right here on Under the Scope. I am your host, Kimberlon B. And this is where good tea and reads are welcome. See you soon.